The desert holds secrets. Some are written in the sand, erased by the wind. Others linger, silent, waiting, refusing to die. And on a warm July night in 1982, the desert of New Mexico claimed one of its most chilling secrets. It began with a phone call. A voice on the other end, calm but urgent. A dying uncle, the man said. Last rites were needed. Quickly. Quietly. A priest was the only one who could help. And so Father Reynaldo Rivera of Santa Fe Cathedral did what priests had done for centuries. He gathered his oils, his stole, his sacred kit. He stepped into the night. And he drove into the darkness. He did not know it was a trap. He did not know it was the last journey he would ever take. Hours later, his car was found abandoned on a lonely dirt road. His wallet untouched. His sacred items undisturbed. And nearby, his body. 2 bullets. Execution style. No robbery. No witnesses. No answers. Just silence. And that silence has lasted for decades. Who was Father Reynaldo Rivera? To the people of Santa Fe, he was not a man of scandal, not a figure of controversy. He was quiet, gentle, a priest who lived for his parish. He walked the dusty streets of the city with a kind of humility that made him beloved. Parishioners remembered him as a man who would stop for a conversation with anyone, no matter their station, no matter their story. He was the kind of priest who didn't just preach faith, he embodied it. And that's what made his death so haunting. Because if a man like Rivera could be lured, hunted, and executed, what did that mean for the rest of us? The investigation began immediately. Detectives traced the phone call, the strange voice that had asked for a priest in the night. But there was no dying uncle. No family in need. No house waiting at the end of the road. It was fiction. A story spun to lure Rivera out of safety. But why? If it had been a robbery, why was nothing taken? If it had been random violence, why the elaborate setup? If it had been personal, why him? Each question opened new doors. And behind each door, only shadows. The funeral was unlike anything Santa Fe had seen in years. The cathedral overflowed. People packed the streets, candles flickering in the desert wind. Tears flowed openly as the coffin was carried beneath the vaulted ceilings, where Rivera had once lifted his voice in prayer. But now the prayers were different. They were not only for his soul. They were for justice. And justice never came. As weeks turned into months, the whispers grew louder. Some believed Rivera had stumbled onto something hidden within the church itself. Secrets not meant to be revealed. Others said it was ritual, the calculated way he had been lured, the precision of his killing. To them it wasn't just murder. It was a message. But if it was a message, who was it meant for? No one knew. No one knows still. All that remained was silence. And in 1982, that silence stretched across Santa Fe like a shadow. A shadow that would darken again just 2 years later in a small Montana town, when another Franciscan priest would vanish. July 20, 1984. 2 years had passed since the death of Father Reynaldo Rivera. 2 years of silence. 2 years of unanswered questions. And then, it happened again. In the quiet town of Ronan, Montana, another Franciscan priest prepared to end his day. His name was Father John Kerrigan. He was 58 years old. By all accounts, Kerrigan was a reserved man. He had recently transferred to Ronan after years of service elsewhere. Those who knew him described him as disciplined, almost private. Unlike Rivera, who was outgoing and deeply woven into his community, Kerrigan seemed to keep a certain distance. He did his work faithfully, but he was harder to know. And yet, that made what happened next no less shocking. Because on that summer night in 1984, Kerrigan vanished. The details were strange from the beginning. On the evening of July 20th, Kerrigan had gone shopping at a local store. Witnesses recalled seeing him buy a small hammer and some groceries. He returned to his parish house. Then, sometime after, he was gone. The next day, his car was discovered abandoned along a rural road. Inside the trunk were blood-stained clothes. Nearby, searchers found his wallet tossed into the brush, his clerical collar, his bloody shirt, and more chilling still, lying in the dirt was the very hammer he had purchased just hours before. But Kerrigan himself was nowhere to be found. Unlike Rivera, whose body was recovered within days, Kerrigan's remains were never discovered. His disappearance was total. It was as if he had stepped off the edge of the earth and into the void. The small community of Ronan was thrown into fear. Ronan wasn't the kind of place where people simply vanished. It was a town where neighbors knew each other's names, where doors were often left unlocked, where the rhythms of life were steady, predictable. And now a priest was missing. His bloodied belongings scattered like ominous clues. His body absent. his fate uncertain. The police investigation unfolded with intensity. They scoured the roadsides. They combed the fields. They dragged nearby rivers and creeks. But the earth held its silence. No trace of Kerrigan's body emerged. It was as if someone, or something, had taken great care to ensure that this disappearance would remain permanent. And yet, the parallels to Rivera's case were too uncanny to ignore. Both were Franciscan priests. Both disappeared under strange, sudden circumstances. Both cases unfolded in the summer 2 years apart. Both left behind signs of violence, blood, belongings discarded. And in both cases, there were whispers. Some in Ronan spoke of seeing suspicious vehicles near the parish. A dark car. Men inside watching. Others whispered of secrets Kerrigan might have carried. Rumors swirled that he had asked to be transferred shortly before his disappearance. Had he known something was coming? Had he feared for his safety? The hammer in particular troubled investigators. Had Kerrigan bought it for some mundane household task? Or had he felt the need for protection? Had he sensed danger was near, close enough that even a priest, bound by vows of faith and peace, sought to arm himself however modestly? If so, it hadn't been enough. As the investigation stalled, the mystery deepened. The people of Montana began to wonder if their quiet state was hiding something darker. And when word spread of Rivera's unsolved murder in New Mexico just 2 years earlier, the question became unavoidable. Could the two cases be connected? The FBI was drawn in. Profiles were studied. Patterns examined. But just as with Rivera, no clear suspect ever emerged. No motive. No confession. Only silence. And silence, as it often does, grew heavier with time. But the case of Father Kerrigan carried yet another shadow. Years later, as the Catholic Church's hidden scandals came to light, records revealed that Kerrigan had faced accusations of misconduct. Allegations that he had abused children. Allegations the Church had quietly handled, quietly transferred him for. And suddenly, a new layer of speculation emerged. Had Kerrigan been targeted for who he was? Had his past caught up with him? Was his disappearance an act of vengeance? A form of justice taken outside the law? Or was it something else entirely? Theories swirled, each darker than the last. Some believed Kerrigan's case, like Rivera's, bore the mark of ritual. The discarded collar. The deliberate scattering of items. The symbolic feel of a priest being erased. Others argued that the two priests were victims of the same killer, or killers. Someone with a vendetta against the Church. Someone meticulous enough to lure, to plan, to execute, and to vanish without leaving a trace. But there were those who whispered an even deeper suspicion. That the Church itself had secrets it didn't want revealed. That both priests had become part of something larger. A story not of random violence, but of silence enforced from within. No proof. No answers. Only questions. And in Ronan, Montana, the memory of Father Kerrigan lingered like a wound that never healed. His body never found. His story never ended. 2 priests. 2 disappearances. 2 unanswered mysteries. And somewhere in that silence lies a truth that still has not been uncovered. When the 1980s are remembered, many think of neon lights, booming music, the rise of technology, and the pulse of a fast-changing world. But beneath that glittering surface, America was a country haunted. There was fear in the air. Fear of the Cold War and nuclear annihilation. Fear of cults, of satanic rituals whispered about in suburban basements. Fear of institutions, the government, the police, even the Church, that people once trusted without question. It was a decade of contradictions. And in that atmosphere of secrecy, suspicion, and paranoia, the stories of Father Rivera and Father Kerrigan found fertile ground. Theories didn't just live in police reports. They spread in hushed conversations. In the shadows of churches. In bars, in diners, in whispered warnings between neighbors. Everyone had an explanation. And none could be proven. Some swore it was ritual. The 1980s were the height of the satanic panic, a cultural hysteria that gripped America. Stories of hidden cults, of sacrifices in the woods, of shadowy figures corrupting children, filled headlines and late-night talk shows. Most of it was exaggerated. Some of it was false. But the fear was real. And when priests began to vanish, when blood was found on collars and bodies disappeared into the night, it was almost too easy for people to connect the dots. Ritual, they whispered. This was ritual. And suddenly the cases weren't just crimes. They were warnings. Signs that something much darker was lurking beneath the surface of American life. Others pointed to organized crime. The Southwest was riddled with trafficking routes, hidden deals, and power struggles that played out far from public view. A priest stumbling into the wrong place, the wrong secret at the wrong time, could easily be silenced. In Montana, whispers of land disputes, smuggling routes, and even mob connections floated around Kerrigan's disappearance. If Rivera and Kerrigan were casualties of those shadows, then their deaths were not personal. They were collateral. And then there was the theory no one wanted to speak aloud, that the church itself had played a role. For Rivera, the theory was fragile. He was beloved, respected. But what if he had uncovered something? What if he had been trusted with knowledge that others needed silenced? For Kerrigan, the theory hit harder. Years later, the truth emerged. He had been accused of abuse. Quietly moved, quietly reassigned like so many priests of that era. Had someone decided that reassignment wasn't enough? That silence required something more permanent? The files never answered. The Vatican never spoke. But the suspicion remained heavy and cold. And in the end, perhaps the most terrifying theory is the simplest. That the truth is gone. That Rivera and Kerrigan's deaths were random, senseless acts of violence. That the parallels are coincidence, nothing more. But if that's true, it means the world is more fragile than we want to believe. It means anyone, anywhere can vanish into the dark and never be found. 2 priests, 2 summers, 2 mysteries, and still, no answers. Not in the police files. Not in the archives of the church. Not in the whispers of the towns where these men lived and died and disappeared. Only silence. And silence, after all these years, is its own kind of violence. But the story isn't over. Because unsolved cases never end. They wait. And maybe the truth is still out there. Buried in an old file. Hidden in a memory someone has carried for decades. Resting in the silence of someone who knows more than they've ever said. Perhaps the answers are waiting for the right moment. The right voice. And maybe that voice is yours. So I ask you, what do you think happened to Fathers Rivera and Kerrigan? Were they victims of a single shadowy hand? Were they silenced by forces greater than we imagine? Or were they simply lost to the chaos of a dangerous world? Tell me what you believe in the comments below. Because this story is not just about the past. It's about secrets. It's about silence. And silence only breaks when we speak. If this mystery gripped you, share it. Pass it forward. Keep it alive. And remember, there are many more hidden tales waiting in the shadows. Stories that demand to be told. Stories that demand to be heard. So if you're ready to keep searching the darkness with me, subscribe. Because the silence may not last forever. And one day, the truth will speak.